good evening. Welcome. We have a kind of our local roundtable with our local legislators here in the Oshkosh Common Council, Monday, May 19th, 2025. We're going to do intros. We'll go around the table kind of quick. Just tell us who you are, maybe, tell us who you are and why you're here. So, what your job is. Matt Mugrower, Mayor, City of Oshkosh. Go this way.
Carl Wheelo, Common Council.
I'm Dean Smith. I'm the Chief of Police here in the City of Oshkosh.
State Rep Nate Gustafson, representing the 55th District, which now includes up to 15th Ave on the south side, and then you got the west side, Sawyer Creek area.
Senator Christian Dazzler Alfheim. I live in Appleton. I am the senator for the 18th District, which is now the other side of Oshkosh, all the way up through Appleton. Very happy to be here.
James Robbie, I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Oshkosh.
Rebecca Grill, I'm the City Manager for the City of Oshkosh.
Brad Spanbauer, I'm a Common Council member.
Lori Palmieri, 54th Assembly District.
I'm DJ Nichols, a Common Council member.
Joe Stevenson, Deputy Mayor.
Sarah Rutkowski, Interim Community Development Director with Oshkosh.
Chris Larson, Oshkosh Council.
Tim Hyman, Oshkosh Fire Chief.
Well, good. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate not only council but our representatives taking the time out of your schedules to meet with us and for us to share some of the concerns we have from the communities that you represent. I think the last time we did this was
2017.
No, it was during COVID. I remember the Brady Bunch screen.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay,
4 or 5 years ago we did this. Probably too long ago, probably. But I'm glad we're in person. I'm glad we're able to sit and chat regarding some mutually beneficial topics. Appreciate you guys and your staffs working through these with Rebecca in her office. We've got 6 items on the agenda, really just 5 topics. Municipal Services Payments Program, levy limit changes in regards to public safety. That's why our public safety officials are here. Infrastructure funding, housing and homelessness, also why they're here. And finally, some fireworks regulations in regards to state statutes. We're hoping to keep it to 6:30-ish, so about an hour and a half. That seems reasonable. That means about 15 minutes a topic, so if one goes long, one's going to probably run short if we want to try to get to them all. We got a big group, so if we could just be respectful of others and their interest in speaking on the topics. Any questions from anybody before I'll just throw the first one out there. I know Municipal Services Payment Program, Rebecca helped renew the focus for us here at the City of Oshkosh a few weeks ago with the bringing forward of resolution. Several council members use their significant outreach on their social media platforms to help gain a little traction, gain a little news, a little buzz on it, and I think that's the topic. That's the first one to start with. I don't know, Rebecca, if you want to talk a little bit about just the impact on the City of Oshkosh and where we're a little deficient in terms of some of the funding sources.
Sure. I think maybe you're probably aware, but just to recap, the state provides a municipal services payment, kind of a payment in lieu of taxes for facilities that are in municipalities that are owned by the state. So Oshkosh is the 3rd largest state facilities within it after Madison and Milwaukee. And in the past, back to 1981, it was fully funded and then each year it's gone down, and so it's been since 2011 since it's been fully funded. So right now we're receiving 37.6% of the actual 100% entitlement that we should get. So $2.7 million, only a little over $1 million is received by the City of Oshkosh, leaving the City of Oshkosh taxpayers to make up for the $1.7 million. So there's a significant concern for us regarding that. Additionally, as you know, each year municipalities start with budget challenges, so deficits. This would make up the one that we're starting with, about half of it, if it was funded at 100%. The governor did have it in his budget, so we've been trying to get people to contact their legislators and just get the word out so people understand exactly what it is, because it's really an issue of fairness for the taxpayers in Oshkosh and the other municipalities that have state facilities in them.
it's my understanding, there's only about 18, currently like 18, 19 million that's been appropriated, maybe in the past, like in 2024.
18.6 million for 2024.
And to fully fund the program statewide, it's in the $40 million range. I'm using rough numbers here, but 40 to 50 million. I'm in no means suggesting that $40 to $50 million is a small amount of money. But that's where that's why we're trying to chat with you all and try to help influence you and use your influence in the process. We know this is the right time to be speaking about that with the things that you guys will be taking up and voting on the next few weeks and few months here.
So in the governor's budget, there was an increase of 23.6 million to county and municipal aid and supplemental county and municipal aid for 25-26, and an additional 41.7 million in fiscal year 26-27 over the prior year, increasing the, I was in shared revenue, sorry. But there is an increase of the percentage of 72%, which would be the highest in 15 years. And it's my understanding it was not removed last week in the 615 items that were removed. So it is not on life support, but it could potentially be tweaked. Additionally, if for some reason it were to be removed, I know that there is a bill out there which has like maybe 3 lines in the bill that would make it some sufficient. I believe that's with Representative Hong's office, should something change. I don't know if you've seen that yet, Representative Gustafson. So 72% isn't the full amount, but it would be a healthy correction.
I would say if it's didn't get cut out, that's a really good sign. I mean, we know what happens if we kind of start with one number and then they strip it down and then try and build back in. The fact that it wasn't stripped out, I think gives us hope. I think that's a very, very good sign. If they didn't like it at all, they would have pulled it out. I think that's a fair thing to say. So that means you have gotten the attention as so deserved. So let's keep pushing that we keep that level. 100% would be great, but I think we have to be realistic. It is amazing how many people are knocking on our doors every day, every minute of the day, saying we need our dollars back in. I mean, there's a real issue going on here. So the fact that there's a increase to get you back up, it really is going to double the number you have now. That's a really good starting point that would hopefully hold us above water, and then we can continue to have the conversations later. But that gives me a lot of hope that both sides of the aisle see the importance of taking care of those that are taking care of state facilities. That's the bottom line, and that's what you're doing.
For the budget process, I think it would help me and probably anybody watching. When you refer to they didn't strip it out, I guess who are you talking about they, and then what impact do you all have on them? And to increase that number from 72 to 100, or even just to get to 72, what's the role you all are playing now after we sent our resolution requesting the increase?
Yeah, I mean, let's take a step back with the entire budget process. So earlier this year in February, the governor gave his budget address while releasing what he would like to see the budget be. Now, obviously, the governor doesn't ultimately vote to pass the budget. It's whatever the legislature puts together that then goes to the governor to either sign or veto. Currently, from his original budget, I believe it was a substantial increase that he was looking for across the board. And so essentially what the process has been is that the Joint Finance Committee, which is typically composed of whoever the majority is on both sides, both the Senate and the Assembly, come together, work on the budget, and then craft that, and then brings it to the body as a whole, and then we vote on it and then send it to the governor. Typically what we've seen in the last how many budgets, especially because it's been a Republican-controlled majority, is that the governor will send what he would like to see. Typically, Republicans will come from an angle of let's get back the base of the last budget. So usually he's added stuff that is additional from what originally was passed the last session. Now we want to get back to that number to start with and then see what his proposals were and then decide maybe, yup, we can agree to this, or we have a funding priority over here as well, and then that will find its way into the budget. and that's where a lot of the conversations are right now. It's if we're going to fund this, we have this priority. If we're going to, obviously spend this much here, we got to cut something here, and just to make sure everything plays nice. And so that's where we're at, essentially. So they is the Joint Finance Committee, and they've been going through a lot of their committee meetings where they're going through and starting to pull some of the stuff out of the budget that the governor had proposed, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's all dead. It's just a matter of process too. So a lot of times there may be some things that have been added to the budget that aren't even budgetary, I guess a budgetary item. It's more of legislation. So we're going to pull that out because of the fact that that should go through the actual bill process with other committees as well. So that's where we're at right now. So again, back to the senator's point though, if it's stayed in there through the first kind of round of going through the current budget, that's probably a pretty good sign.
So I think that's super helpful context, and sorry to talk again, but I guess then if it comes through committee for full vote, and this item is stripped out, let's say it goes back down to 37%, is that where we are today? Would it take then a representative or a senator amending the budget at that point to put it back in? Is that the way that would work?
So that's why what you'll hear from folks is that they are doing standalone bills post budget, so things that don't make it through in the budget, they can introduce as a separate bill. And that's what I was referring to. Rep. Hong had early on in the process, they did a draft of this sum sufficient to make municipalities and counties whole in the event that it might not, but it sounds like it has a decent chance. So if for some reason it wasn't palatable, yes, another bill separately could be introduced.
So, and that's helpful. So can you not vote to amend the budget?
You could.
And so I guess why wouldn't you?
So essentially, it's kind of the mentality, especially among our colleagues, that a lot of those fights are going to happen within that committee. And by the time that budget's coming to the floor, we've had those fights of what we've added, what we're not going to add. You could. I'm not going to say you couldn't, but typically it's going to be seen as out of order at that point with a lot of the discussion that was already had. So you could. I'm not saying you couldn't, but it's usually not very favorable nor likely for it to be added if it was amended from the floor.
Sure. And sorry, last one, guys. Can we have your all's commitment today to either vote to amend the budget or to vote for Representative Hahn's bill to fully fund it if we get there?
I can't commit to that at this time. As I said, we have a lot of things that we're going to still have to discuss as the budget goes through.
I think it's fair to say I like the idea, and I will say yes. The GFC is made up of, it's a 12-4 organization, right? So there are 12 Republicans from the House and the Senate, and there are many fewer of the Democratic Party. So the power of the minority in the JFC becomes a lot more evident. So the strength is in the majority. The good news is everybody needs a budget passed. And the governor has the ultimate power to veto, line item veto, or accept. And in the end, it is in all of our best interest to pass a budget. So there are conversations that go on. I think truly the best thing that we can say in this meeting is that it's still in there, which means the majority believes in it also. Otherwise, they would have just taken it out right away. So I think that, again, at this point, to ask for more than the 72 is a very, 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 very unlikely thing to happen. The fact that you may indeed get 72%, I think, is a glorious win that we should be very happy for, and then we commit to continuing to talk about this and get us where we need to be. Because if our municipalities aren't whole, that's a direct correlation to the pockets of our taxpayers in terms of property tax. So everybody wants relief in taxes. I think a lot of the pressure in taxes come from property taxes because our communities are bearing the weight that the state used to share in. So if we can address that issue, us taking care of our communities in the right way actually takes care of all of our families and their kitchen tables because we're taking the weight off of them. That is a holistic conversation that I look forward to having. Whether we're in the majority or the minority, it doesn't matter. We're all interested in taking care of our kitchen table families. And these aren't just about giving monies to government. They're about providing what's necessary to take care of our communities without beating up on our local taxpayers. So we should be in agreement on that conversation. The numbers will always be debatable, but again, looking at what you're saying and the fact that it's still in the governor's budget, there's great hope that there's positive momentum to help the community members and the municipal government.
So sorry, that was yes, though. You'll
You did say yes. You did say yes.
For me, that's a yes.
Perfect, great.
I am a yes.
Thank
I
you.
am a yes. And the expectation is that the budget will be passed by July 1st. However, if for some reason it was not, unlike the federal government, it's my understanding, we go back to the prior budget until one is passed.
Great, thank you.
So, I fully understand everything you just said, and I very much appreciate the almost doubling of it. But if I came into City Hall and paid 72% of my tax bill, that's not going to work very well. It feels like not a win, but a step towards a win. But I can't celebrate that we're still getting shorted on the MSP that we're supposed to be receiving.
And you shouldn't. That is your absolute job, to keep on pushing for what's appropriate. You shouldn't stop. I think, again, in a reality, nobody's going to be perfectly happy right now because there's so many different things going on. And so I think to find a perfect win right now is not likely. So you should keep on fighting. We should still continue to want more for you to make it right. Again, it's good for the households in your community, not just the government. It really is a direct line from family pocketbooks direct back to the services. So we should keep on fighting. Our expectation should be that the state takes care of the responsibilities that they have, and the taxpayers of Oshkosh not bear the burden of them not doing so.
And I think that's an important part, is that the Common Council doesn't want this so that we can spend more money.
Right.
The Common Council wants this for tax relief for
Right.
citizens that with the revaluation just saw a huge hit.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say how much I appreciate the resolution and the amplifying of this message, because getting the message across to our colleagues down in Madison that Oshkosh is third behind Milwaukee and Madison in this is really important distinction. The other thing I just want to point out too is the former city manager, Mark Roloff, and I had a conversation about this some months back, and how we also had to sort of look out for the university to a certain degree on this, because what could be made whole on this end could end up having a ding for them. But as we checked with Fiscal Bureau, it doesn't appear, and we checked with the university, it doesn't appear that that would be the case. So we always want to make sure that, you know, we don't end up like cutting off our nose to spite our face, right? So that's something that is really appreciated, that your message was amplified there.
I only have one minor question. Yes, it appears you've maybe have the budget.
This is
from
just,
government- or
this
some-
is
or
the
some
budget in
synop-
brief.
That's great.
This is the 174-page synopsis.
The footnotes?
Yeah.
My only question was, in Governor Evers' proposal, was there any escalator built in for future, like keeping up with CPI or any sort of indexing, or is it still a static number that would, over time, actually reduce
It
its
says the
value?
governor recommends the program be tied to the state's sales tax growth beginning in fiscal year 26-27, ensuring we keep commitment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Any other questions on this topic? Appreciate all the discussion so far. Levy limit changes for public safety. Rebecca, this
Sure.
maybe in your area here to start us.
Well, it's also in the two chiefs
Yep.
area. So there's 3 EMS bills that are pending right now. I'm not sure what the status of them are, but the first one is investing in EMS education, and then a regional EMS levy limit exemption, which would be somewhat relevant to us here, and then also the reimbursing care when patients aren't transported, and there's already, so those I think we're in favor of from a public safety perspective. There's also an existing levy limit exception if you create a joint fire department, but there's not anything similar, any levy limit exceptions for the police department that I'm police departments that I'm aware of. So I don't know what that would look like, but police and fire are the majority of our budgets.
I do want to clear up though,
Yeah.
it's not joint fire, it's joint EMS typically. And that's going to be in conjunction typically with the fire departments.
The current pending,
Yes.
the existing statute relates to the fire departments.
Right, so the existing, so the addition would be the EMS.
Yeah.
So that's where I just want to make sure that's
Yeah.
clear there.
Mhm.
So, and from your perspective, I think I just heard that you guys are pretty supportive of this. Obviously, from my perspective, definitely diving in last year a little bit more into, I don't want to say the spat, if you will, but the disagreements of the funding model between the rural communities and the city of Oshkosh. And I see both sides, and I absolutely understand where the city of Oshkosh has come from in that situation. So that's part of where this had been an idea, actually, that I'd gone down with, but then also found out there's other colleagues down there as well that have similar situations going on. So glad to hear that obviously you're supportive of it, and I think through the process so far, I think we've had hearings so far in committee, and we're still trying to just make sure everyone's comfortable before we bring it to the floor, to the entire body.
I think one of the things that we've been talking about is maybe the number of municipalities that need to participate, because wasn't it 8 or something?
It's 8. Yep, currently 8.
Which could be a challenge. I mean, we've been talking with our partners just about being able to provide the service, period, which the investing in the education would hopefully help, but there are some challenges, especially with the geographic area that we currently provide service for. So I don't know that 8 would be a good number to settle on.
And 8 is the minimum, is that? what I'm
Correct.
hearing? Okay.
8 municipalities, or I believe it was 232 square miles.
Okay.
Are the 2 criteria that could be met to form the new district.
Sure.
Senator Kabagavara will be late, but she is coming.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you. I don't know if either of the chiefs have anything you want to share on this particular topic. You've got a captive audience and they can't leave for a little while, so.
Well, when I hear the number of 8, certainly there's with the volunteer services there for EMS, for fire, not necessarily for EMS, but for fire. There's probably more voluntary type fire companies out there. But in all of Winnebago County, there's 7 law enforcement agencies in the whole county. So, that as a standard, I don't know how many there are for fire service, but
Just 2
that seems like a very large number for our county to try to reach.
Yeah, with the area as well, I mean, we already cover a pretty good area, but 8 and that many square miles is a pretty big area for one kind of entity.
It seems to be unattainable knowing that Oshkosh Fire Rescue serves basically the middle to southern part of Winnebago County.
Yeah.
And then it's served elsewhere with other services to the north. So it reduces the ability of the city of Oshkosh to participate in something like that.
Well, and I think a lot of the logic behind the legislation now is for the fact that the city of Oshkosh, at one point, from my understanding, needed these communities to make it a little bit more affordable for the residents, but now have become more arguably a burden from a city's financials perspective. And so essentially it's splitting you off from not having to actually service these rural communities as they can kind of break away and form their own district. So then the city of Oshkosh can maintain and focus on the city rather than all these other communities that have been essentially subsidized at some point over the process of establishing the emergency response.
I think there's an increasing realization that there will be the same challenges that we have as far as staffing.
Absolutely. One other point to bring up as it relates to potential levy limit changes for public safety.
is that really with Acts 10 and 32, we know that public safety is a part of the carve out of that. And we are bound by labor agreements that have negotiated built-in salary increases every single year. And with those salary increases, without a corresponding assistance in funding to help the municipalities with that, whether it be the carve-outs or such for levy limits or some mechanism, the city goes into each year with an increase in the budget. There's just going to be a functional increase based upon the negotiated contracts that come into play. It's not, the city just can't say, no, we're not going to raise the budget. It's going to happen. So, and the fire service and the police service are the big labor pieces of at least for the city of Oshkosh, and probably for most cities our size across the state. So a consideration of that would be very helpful for us as it relates to the taxpayers here in the city.
For us, it would just be supporting the educational standpoint. We are, the fire service in general, kind of in a crisis mode, especially with paramedics. I was at a recent graduation at Fox Valley Tech. They had 100% placement before anybody graduated. So everybody there is already hired. We anticipate we could need as many as 24 to 26 people in the next 18 months with the number of retirements we're having.
In Oshkosh?
Just in the city of Oshkosh. So
Out of the force of roughly
99 line personnel.
There you go.
So the need is great, and kind of the storm clouds are on the horizon with the number of people in class. I think we were able to hire 2 out of the last paramedic class, but there's just not as many people going into the field, and the demand is getting higher. So anything we can do to support education, especially at the EMS level for paramedics, which is like the highest level of pre-hospital care. Anything we can do to support that is definitely needed.
That's just, I hate to say it too, I mean, the real elephant in the room is just the workforce shortage that's affecting everyone, everywhere, and it's going to continue for, I hate to say decades to come because of population trends, especially those who are coming to our state and just in general. Obviously generational, how many more kids people are having is still pretty stagnant. And so we're going to have to continue, obviously, to hear and find ways to be innovative and try to attract that talent to our state. So, but definitely noted.
Thank you.
I think one of the other challenges for EMS services is the response to the assisted living facilities and the nursing homes, because they will look for falls because they will not assist the staff there. So I don't know if there's something that can be addressed in that regard. Maybe you can speak a little bit more to that.
What we've kind of ran into is some facilities kind of supplementing their lack of staffing with using emergency services. Somebody's at a CBRF or community-based residential facility where it's not necessarily skilled nursing, and they don't necessarily have the staff to provide the level of care they need. So somebody falls down, at a nursing home, you'd have skilled staff there to help them get up, give them a neural assessment, make sure everything's okay. Where those types of facilities basically are just using our ambulance service or paramedics to come and provide that service. And then if we don't transport them, there's no charge to that. We do have some charges built in now for lift assist and things like that, but we are running into where a lot of facilities are utilizing emergency services kind of a supplement to, again, they have the same staffing problems we do, but using 2 paramedics and an ambulance is not necessarily the best use of resources for something like that.
I have 2 bills for that, and we introduced it last session. It got a full Senate Health Committee hearing favorably, and Senator Guevara and Chief Stanley and I worked quite a bit on that. We're reintroducing it. However, I believe Senator Guevara may be introducing a different version with regard to disclosure about what assistance is available at these facilities when folks go in. Our 2 bills that we put together were modeled after Arizona. We changed some liability exemptions, and basically the first bill would require training, someone trained in first aid and fall recovery specifically to be on site. And that would also require DHS to come up with that program. And then the second bill would have put $300,000 towards a pilot program of putting in electronic lift devices in facilities and gathering some data on that. I have 2 of those sitting down right outside my office if you're ever in the Capitol and want to see how they work. I'm working on trying to get one over to the senior center. But in any event, we'll be reintroducing those this year. We're working with AARP to try it. They were really very instrumental. There was pretty much a legislative mandate in Arizona because it was passed overwhelmingly. But working with AARP is a big piece of this too.
Yeah, any way we can put people in contact with the type of help they need at the right level, I think is a positive.
Yeah, Wisconsin's got a little strange thing from what I understand. I shouldn't say strange thing, little different situation in that they require an RN do the fall assessment. In practice, perhaps LPNs are having to when there's not an RN available. But the type of first aid training, the first element of that is an assessment. So we're trying to work around the language on that and still keep people safe.
I think that's incredibly helpful to note. I think that when we talk about staffing shortages, you always think, how can you get more people, or how can you need less people? Those are kind of the 2 options. I think using technology to help with these problems and assisted living facilities, that's certainly with your lift devices. I think that makes a ton of sense. I guess I'm curious, Representative Gustafson said we're going to have staffing issues for decades. How do you all see the role of the legislature in attracting additional people to the state? And I guess what are you all doing in your roles to do that?
So there's this little thing in my world that I live and breathe right now. It's called AI. And so within certain, professions, especially what we're discussing today, yes, a computer's not going to replace someone at this time. But there are a lot of opportunities to augment our current workforce with technologies, including tools like AI, to make them more productive, make them more efficient, make them more self-sustaining compared to needing multiple people to do it. So to Rep. Palmieri's point, there's technology out there that I think if there's opportunities that we can really look at, is this going to reduce that workforce burden in some way, shape, or form? We're going to have those conversations. So, but within my lens, I embrace the technology side, how can we continue to develop our state, and with whatever mechanisms we can pull the most amount of people we can at this point back into our state, we got to take those opportunities.
I think that's helpful. I guess just so I understand, you for AI as it relates to some of these more physical jobs where you have to be in person, I guess is your suggestion that we will incorporate things like AI and technology and then retrain people whose jobs are displaced into jobs like EMS?
Yeah, retooling is going to have to be a major conversation we're going to have, especially as people, I wouldn't say people are going to be displaced. I think that's a misleading term, or maybe a scare tactic term, that these tools are going to replace people. It's just the current demand of certain workforce needs is going to close for the fact that the current people that are working are being given better tools and better opportunities to be more efficient.
But the idea is that when that demand decreases, they would be retrained into these more physical jobs. I guess my original question was, how are we attracting people to the state to fill these roles? Because then we're going to have staffing shortages.
Right. Well, that's $1 million question. What are we doing to attract people? And there's plenty of things on the table that we've been discussing of economic opportunity, obviously, too. So
thanks.
If I could just kind of tag on to that a little bit, there were a number of items that were removed from the budget that, things relative to paid family leave, child care, a number of items that were removed from the budget. But one of the things I was really glad to see is that in the Housing and Real Estate Committee on the Assembly side just last week, there was a significant hearing and a bill to, I guess, tweak, if you will, the bipartisan housing package that has several WIDA incentives in there There was a significant portion of money that did, I think, only 16 million out of, I can't remember if it was like
500.
500.
16 million out of 500 million.
So those tweaks have been added to allow different stacking of funding mechanisms, like with TID, TIF, historic tax credits, with some of those programs that, you know, were not in the last version. So housing is a big piece of attracting folks. They got to have a place to live. You know, we are looking at, I believe it was like 140,000 units statewide, I believe, that are needed just to keep pace. There is quite a bit of work being done around the housing end of things so that folks can have a place to live if they decide to come here or come back. I've been seeing some advertisements that are trying to entice people back.
Just to follow up, Senator, I think if you don't mind, Senator.
Yeah, I think
wanted to-
everything that's mentioned is valid, right? I mean, we are embracing technology, we need to continue to do that, but I think we also have to look at the root of the problem. Why is it we're having fewer kids? And it's because it's ridiculously expensive to have children. So what are we doing there are lots of young families out there that want to have more kids, they just can't afford it. So I think it is imperative that we look at childcare and housing and healthcare as foundational issues that have to be solved. We have to invest in families so that they want to have more kids and they financially can have that. So again, it isn't just about trying to get people from other states, because we're all in the same boat. Everybody is in the same boat in terms of it is expensive. Childcare is more than college education right now. Grandparents are not always the greatest answer because they're then coming out of the workforce also. So we're not getting as many in. We're losing people out to take care of their own kids. We're losing the grandparents. We have got to deal with and understand that childcare is a foundational issue. It is the infrastructure of our economy. So I'm a big believer in that. There is no silver pill, but I think we have to be open in the business community and in our families about addressing our workforce childcare issue going forward so that we can finally bring an end to it. Again, you can't make people have more kids. It doesn't work that way. But we have to at least see what is causing our numbers to be down. And I think there is very clear evidence that it is the cost of being a young family today. So I think there are today issues, there are technology issues to deal with the today problem, but if we don't get at the root of the problem, we're going to continue to chase this cycle. And I think foundational investment in assuring that everybody that wants to go out there and give to their community in public service or be in the fire department, police department, whatever that may be, we have to give them an opportunity to find that success in their own families. And we have to start dealing with these foundational issues as well.
I guess I want to point, to your point, I agree, it is the cost, but then sometimes it's easy to just point to the cost and say, throw money at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, we have to ask, why is the cost going up? Where is that money? Why is childcare getting so much more expensive? Well, obviously, we have less slots, more demand. That's starting with probably a lot of childcare places deciding to close because of overburdensome regulations that have probably come down from the state or federally. So we have to really address those. That's something within our purview as the legislature to try to address. But to your point, though, yes, these are foundational, including the housing thing. That's probably one of the biggest ones is how do you attract people here if there's nowhere for them to live? And so I know Oshkosh, I will give you kudos with some of the projects that I've heard that you guys are working on. So I think to your point that there is something with legislatively that we can address, but that doesn't mean adding more solutions. That means removing some of the barriers that we put up in the first place. So
Fair, and I agree. In the 5 meetings I've had with the childcare industry in the last 10 days, that would be a fingernail's worth of the issues that they're sharing. So what I would love to see is that all of us come together and listen to all of the issues and work with the industry to find the solutions as opposed to telling them how to fix it. There's more to it, and we have to find agreements that it's worth digging in and listening to the industry as well and trying to work our way through. But again, there's value and truth in all things, but I think in the right we can't keep on chasing around the issue and throwing Band-Aids when the foundation itself needs to be secured to move forward.
Councilmember Flom, and we'll try to wrap up the levy limit changes for public safety part.
Yeah, I think
you
we're
wanted to.
kind of moving into a tangential direction, but two questions for you, Representative Palmieri. Accessory dwelling units, ADUs, I know you had brought that up before, and also local control for Airbnbs. If that's a separate conversation, we can have that later, but I know
No.
those-
Yeah, those aren't on levy limit changes for public safety, so I'm
Okay.
gonna hold you to that to at least until we get to housing.
Got an answer
Yeah.
for you.
All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Sorry about that. Anything else with?
I'll comment in the workforce vein if that's okay.
Still
Not on
connected.
levy limits and workforce is, I mean, housing and workforce are like my shtick and my job, so I can't let the conversation go on without saying something. I think I've talked with each of you individually on workforce. We do need a robust workforce. We need to attract people here. We need to support families. We also do need to embrace those technologies, right? We do need to make sure our industry is moving in Industry 4.0. We're embracing AI. We're embracing automation. I was just talking with WDC last week on how we bring that tech sector to rural Wisconsin. And I think embracing those is a great thing, things we need to support. But again, I'm going to talk about the family issues as well. It takes 18 years to make an 18-year-old. So I do think having robust cost effectiveness around deregulating some of those industries that need to maybe be deregulated, also helping out with costs on things. I think having paid parental leave, having childcare reductions have been the only two things that I've seen in really modern history that helps reverse a birth rate. This is something I study quite a bit. Typically birth rates you see once they go negative, they never come back. The only instance I could ever find that this has been reversed is in our Scandinavian countries and Europe. Don't look at their birth rates today, they're not very good, but when they instituted these paid parental leaves and cost savings for daycares back in the 80s, I believe, they did see their birth rates incline and actually become a net producer of births for probably about 40 years. So again, that wasn't a permanent solution, but I would say if people could say our birth rates would reverse for the next 40 years, we'd all agree that's probably a good thing. So yeah, I just wanted to give my 2 cents. We need to support families. Also need to make sure we're making our state technology first. So.
Councilmember Flum did have a question on fire districts.
Yes, equalized tax fire districts in the same way that school districts are equalized in their tax values in multiple municipalities. The issue that we've been having with our rural EMS rates, as I'm sure has been touched on here, is that they need to be manually negotiated. If there was a way for us in statute to be able to have a fire district and equalize the spread of that over all the municipalities, that's something that I would be curious about, for lack of a better term, because these are conversations, as I'm sure Chief Hyman is aware of, is that they always have to be returned to at a certain point in time. An equalized fire district, I think, would be helpful from my perspective. And I don't know if any of the other legislators have comments on that, but.
I can't remember which representative was working on a bill draft around this. I don't think that anything has been released, but I do recall the Fire Chiefs Association this past year coming and advocating for fire districts, but I don't have information.
Right, it's a cost spread question
Yeah.
for us. Yeah.
Okay. Good question. If there's nothing else regarding levy limits or anything tangentially attached to levy limits, we'll move on to infrastructure funding. I imagine this is more of James's area than
Yeah, I
others.
mean,
So.
it's an increasing challenge, and I think James can explain why, but I think we're looking for if there's possible ideas about grants or programs that, could be initiated by the state for maybe co-locating facilities with maybe the county and city or different things to incentivize that, but all of our buildings need to be replaced. They're not energy efficient. They don't work for how we operate now. The school district, the county, the state's facilities, the city. There's some way that we could have some type of grant funding for that, and then all of James' infrastructure, the things you don't necessarily see except for the streets.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Certainly facilities, not going to be my forte, but, the things that we see out in the street, obviously the street surface is the one everybody sees, and that's the one everybody likes to talk about, but there's so much more to it than just that. One of the things that we have learned over the years is that when we're doing a street reconstruction project, we have to be very thorough on all of the underground utilities. As a community, many years ago, it was not that way. The street would get paved, and 5 years later, the utilities are digging it up because they're breaking. So we have become very comprehensive in how we look at our street programs. There are a number, obviously, of funding mechanisms. Most of them, originate with the federal government through the Wisconsin Department of Transportation to locals, but there's the Surface Transportation Program, the Local Road Improvement Program, Bridge Program, the Transportation Alternatives, Congestion Management, just a myriad of programs. And I think some of the challenges that we as local units of government face is with many of these programs, especially with their federal funding ties, come, we'll say, additional conditions and strings that have to be met. And I think one of the most challenging that we deal with is federal wage rate compliance. For example, the State Department of Transportation has a software package that they use. They input the wage rate determination, the contractors upload their weekly payrolls, and it looks for any anomalies, and they still have to do some of the interviews, but you don't have to have a person go through and review every single one of those weekly pay statements from the contractors. As local units of government, we don't have those tools, and we don't have access to the tools that the DOT has. So if we're managing a program on the local level, we have to get those weekly payrolls, and a person has to go through them, or we have to find a software package that we might use once every few years, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense either. So certainly we would be excited across several levels of local government to be able to utilize some of those tools that maybe the department already has in place, that could be a very cost-effective way, again, to use the technology that already exists that we just can't get to right now. I sat on a committee about 2 years ago with county highway commissioners, local townships, the League of Municipalities had asked me to be their representative on that. And it was actually the gentleman from the county highway commissioners that brought that exact subject up. He's like, this is difficult for us. So that is a roadblock to using, trying to get access to some of those dollars, because for small projects or small federal funding projects, the administrative burden is too much to even consider. It's going to cost us more to administer some of these grants that we could receive than we're actually getting. And that's where, when I'm looking at grants, if it's going to cost me more to administer it, I'm not going to apply for it. It doesn't make sense at the end of the day. So those are some of the challenges that we face. I think, another one, I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't bring up the lead service replacement program. I know Representative Palmieri, that's been a big topic of concern for you over the years. It's looking at our inventory. We are a very old city, one of the oldest in the state. We have a lot of this to deal with. I was looking at our online dashboard earlier this afternoon. We're still estimating between 7,000 and 8,000 private side services that need to be replaced at a community cost of $40 to $50 million. And with the EPA regulations where they're at right now, if there's not something that changes, those have to be 100% replaced by 2037. So we have 12 years to replace 7,500 services, and at the cost of $50 million. And that's just the private side. That doesn't count what the utility is responsible for. That as a utility, we take care of that, but we're also trying to help our residents take care of their side. And that is a big struggle and a big challenge. And I know the way that, some of the money comes down from the federal government through the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. We've had some challenges. I think we had a gap of about 6 or 8 months from the last program ending till we actually got word from DNR that we were actually getting funding. So there have been some gaps that hopefully will speed up over time. But
and that came from like a secondary tranche, right? After the gap.
Yeah, there was the DNR, I think, went back and used a secondary pot of money, if you will, that wasn't tied to the current federal regulations to help us, cover some that were replaced during that gap period where, we didn't know if there was any funding for a program or not. And when the funding came out, it's like, well, here are all the requirements, but everything that was done during this gap period didn't know about those requirements, so we couldn't comply with those requirements. So we were fortunate that the DNR said, okay, we've got a little money here that we can use to help, get through that challenging point.
Yeah, and there was 300 million or over 300 million in the governor's budget for replacing lead laterals and preventing lead poisoning. Unfortunately, that was one of the 615 items that was removed by JFC last week.
I'm sorry, you said 400 million?
300, over 300 million.
Over 300 million, and that was reduced down to zero?
It was removed from the budget. Not sure if they're, I don't know if you, Gary,
Do you know what the total is for the 615 items that was removed? What the total ask that would have been? Okay, so if that's one item that was 300 million, okay.
I think the hard part about this conversation is, again, we know money is tight. We know we're trying to send it in 17 directions, but we also know that lead is harming our children and our people. So it's difficult when we have these conversations. When we talk about budgets, I think in a perfect world, we would like to wave a magic wand and solve it, and those don't exist.
Right.
But when it does come down to priorities, again, whether it's federal, whether it's state, whether it's local, I think making sure that our children are safe in our buildings that they're mandated to go to, whether it be schools or local, I think it's important that we deal with it. So as a community, as a state, we have to acknowledge that there is investment necessary to make sure that our kids are safe. And I think there's enough science out there to validate that the lead that is in those water pipes and the paint and whatnot is causing us damage in the long run. And the state is paying for those problems as well. So again, we can't avoid this conversation. Our municipalities do not have a magic wand that we can wave and solve it on our own. I think one of the best things I got to do in my career, or second career, whatever this is be on municipal government and realize how desperately we are trying to solve our own problems. And this is an example of something that we need help on. The help has to come from the state and from a federal level, and we first have to share the vision that the lead needs to be removed from these pipes. Period. And we have to get it done.
Sorry. I guess that's a question so when this is more of a federal level question. I just want to know if you guys have heard anything. I mean, the idea behind some of these cuts we've seen at the federal level is that you're supposed to gain some sort of efficiencies. I've heard like maybe that money would trickle back down to the state. Have you guys heard? I do think sometimes this money can be better spent at local levels. We can maybe do it more efficiently. Have you heard that there's that type of funding is coming, or?
I've not heard, though, in exactly your point of a lot of the programs and everything else that they've been finding, waste, fraud, and abuse in, is to the point of, okay, we have been spending this money somewhere, now we have this additional money. Is there somewhere where we could invest that would make more sense? So, I mean, something like that, definitely a conversation should be had.
Sure.
Especially, hopefully, from a federal level. Obviously, if we're given the opportunity from a state level to obviously administer some of that too, I think we should have that conversation for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, because I do think, again, if there is money that's out there, I mean, we want to be first and foremost to try to help with our infrastructure, help with our lead pipe replacements, and I do think we're positioned at the state level, at the local level, to help to spend that money and spend it wisely and do it efficiently.
You're spot on.
And
Yep.
when the other side of the aisle, discusses one-time funding uses out of the surplus, that's totally an appropriate place. When you're talking about replacing lead pipe and infrastructure, for a significant number of generations to come.
I mean, I would probably be in the same camps too. I wouldn't probably disagree. It's, was it 1.2 billion in one-time surplus right now, and there's over 10 million or 10 billion that people are asking for out of that one time. So you're talking about roughly 12%. It gets real tight, and obviously you know this. You're down there with me right now, so but it gets really, really tight when you have a lot of what seem like very just causes that this one-time funding can go to, but we are stuck in the rock and hard place of determining where that funding is going to go.
And, you know, I don't know about your offices, but we are also hearing from a number of the nonprofits from, you know, this district and surrounding districts that are, you know, have some reliance on federal funding. One of the meetings I had was with Solutions, and they have like $1 million operating budget. They built up their programming and resources, you know, still not to the level of what we need, but they built that up, and out of that $1 million, about 600,000 is on the chopping block from federal action. So there's budget A, B, and C, right?
Well, and sorry, one more point to that point too is, I think a lot of us even down in Madison right now are doing a little bit of a hurry up and wait. Yes, we're doing our budget, but eventually if something does trickle down from the federal government where there are cuts that now we will have to backfill, a great example would be the Medicaid expansion. We're going to have that conversation before we expand Medicaid. If the federal funding is going to flip the model where it's 80% federally funded, then we leave ourselves with an even bigger gap that we're going to have to come back and backfill. So being one of the 10 states, I think, that hasn't passed the expansion, we're actually posed in a spot where we're actually going to be better than the other 40 right now when it comes back around to at least attempting to fund some of these programs that we currently have. So that's the real kicker, which we are all walking into a wall of fog and kind of waiting to see what actually shakes out from federal cuts that will affect us as a state, how we have to fund those.
And to James's point earlier, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act, those two bills have been mind-numbingly complex in their disbursements, and they have been dispersed at a record slow pace. And to your point on some of the tools that we don't have that the feds require, it's been very difficult for us to access those funds. What I would echo is that if there's any conversations between state and federal stakeholders specifically in regards to potentially removing some of the barriers around the money that's already been appropriated, if not, that won't be clawed back or attempted to be impounded. So from there, the access to those funds could be made easier for municipalities. So that some of those guardrails come off, and that we would work with the state DOT in that regard to access those funds if Congress doesn't have a different idea on where they want to move them.
I think, I just want to point out that there's an interplay a little bit about what we're talking about with, did you have a response? Sorry.
No, Carl,
I'm good. Go ahead, DJ.
Are you sure?
Please.
I mean, there's just an interplay with what we're talking about a little bit, and so I know it's easy to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, and it's different sides of the aisle, and that we don't care about that at city council level in Oshkosh. I know you all have to because you're playing the game, and we all see it on TV, and it's numbing for everyone. But we're really just trying to help the people that live in our borders. And we know you all are doing that too, but you're still fighting with the other side. So I just want to talk about the interplay a little bit, where we're talking about lead pipes. And I think, James, you said $40 to $50 million.
That's my current estimate
back of the napkin.
on the private side.
On the private side only. On the private side. Yep. And what we know, to Senator Alfheim's point, is that children are affected by lead in pipes. So we know that. We also know that raising a child is incredibly expensive. We've heard that said today. We know it takes 18 years to make an 18-year-old. It's just expensive to do. And so when we think about how do we attract people to the state, because I don't think AI is going to allow us to have more EMS workers. I think that we have to think about how do we take care of our kids, and then how do we get people to come to the state. So you look at things like paid family leave, where I work at a company that we're headquartered in Chicago, but we have properties just in Wisconsin and then Illinois, obviously, Minnesota and Michigan, so our border states. They all have paid family leave. They all have paid pregnancy leave. And so we are putting ourselves at a disadvantage where we have lead pipes in cities. We can't figure out how to pay for cleaning them up. We think local government might be able to spend that money more effectively, but it's tied up at the state level. And we're not willing to look at how we can invest in families generally. And so I think that certainly I'm frustrated with all of that and all the interplay because I think there is a lot of partisan politics going on here. But I agree that if we can take a one-time appropriation to allow children to drink water safely in the city of Oshkosh, I would support that. And I guess I would also ask that if that was stripped out of the governor's bill, and it sounds like it was, and it sounds like it's going to be an uphill battle to get it back in, I would ask that we do have a standalone bill after the budget passes, if that doesn't make it, to actually add that so that we can get clean drinking water for children in Oshkosh.
It's being worked on.
Thanks.
This is why I wanted you to go first, because I thought you were going to go there. This is what I wrote down because of like over the last three things. We need more babies. Lead is not great for babies. Lead is all over Oshkosh. Money's tight. What are we gonna do? You know, it's, you know, and I'm not disagreeing with all of you, and I'm not trying to throw anybody in the bus, but like, if we see the problem, we know that it's causing the problem. We can't just go, oh, you know, money's tight, and then the problem goes away.
Or give us our money back and we'll spend it.
I did want to ask, James, that was the private side, the 7,000 to 8,000 that were still remaining to be replaced. What about on the public side? Where are we at on that inventory?
Honestly, Lori, I didn't look at that number. I was more focusing on the private side because at the end of the day, the utility's going to do the public side.
Yeah.
So I was more focused on the private side because that is I'll say the harder one to get done.
But you have to estimate how many miles.
Well, if we say 7,000, I'll round down. If we say 7,000, and if we say the average, you know, home, you know, Sarah, what's the typical setback? Front setback's going to be, you know, new development probably 25 feet.
Yes.
Older developments,
Depends
you
on
know,
the zoning.
10 certainly. So we'll pick a round number. We'll say 20 feet. So 7,000 times 20 feet is 140,000 feet, if I'm doing that quick math correctly.
But isn't it the newer, or isn't it the older homes that we're talking about, pre-1984, not the newer construction?
It is the older ones, but again, there are, you know, not all of those are right on the you know, on the right-of-way line. There are several of them that still do have, you know, some reasonable front yards. But even if we were to say, you know, 10 feet, that's still 70,000 feet, which is, you know, I'm not even be able to do that math quickly in my head. A lot of miles. But right now with our lead service program, private side replacements are averaging around 5,400 per replacement, and that's where I said, you know, 7,500 times 5,400, that gets me to around $42.5 million if I remember correctly.
Question for the legislators: do we know how much money is currently sitting in the innovation fund? I'm going in a certain direction, but in terms of the innovation fund, I know it's used for mainly consolidation of services between municipalities, but some sort of form of innovation fund or different corollary to that act, could some of those funds be made accessible for projects like these? I don't want to start a cascade within every city request funds out of a pot of money that is just simply not enough, not big enough to tackle that. But I think this is a program that would be along the lines of innovation. I understand it's not what the bill originally set out to do, but in the same idea and in the same vein, if perhaps there was a regional approach to tackling lead service lines, that would be one idea that I would have. I was curious about how much money was in the innovation fund as of today. If you don't know, that's completely fine.
I do not. Do you?
I doubt it's enough to cover many of these programs, probably let alone in Oshkosh.
But I guess, are you saying then, with that regional approach, I mean, how big of a region are you talking about?
County, perhaps.
Yeah.
County, OASD, depending on how we want to break down that map. I'm just trying to find reasonable ways that if a standalone bill was introduced or something of that nature, if it's not included in the budget, it sounds like it probably won't be, an approach to it that could have funds, like the innovation funds, or of the similar nature to it, or the same idea for that.
And I'm imagining that, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm imagining that fund will probably have money left. I think a very well-intentioned bill, but it is notoriously hard to use. I've heard a lot of communities say it's hard to, it's clunky right now. But again, I think that the bill is well-intentioned, and if it can be retooled for another kind of regional
Right, a
approach to.
retooling of sorts of the innovation fund.
We got two left, Mayor.
Oh, we do. Anything else on infrastructure funding from the city side on this topic, or anything from our representatives at all on this?
I just wanted to point out something else that was not removed from the budget. And in our district specifically, I believe has like 30 different projects that have benefited from Knowles Nelson over the last couple of decades. And there was a significant investment. And that's to be used either for land acquisition or amenities, trail things. We've used quite a bit of it on the Riverwalk. So that's good news for not just for the district, but for the state. There's a great bipartisan love for Knowles Nelson stewardship. So there is some good news, and the rest is to be determined.
Does it come with additional guardrails to avoid why Knowles Nelson went bankrupt in the first place?
From what I understand, there's some discussions going on about whether or not there might be some additional oversight.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to the housing and homelessness topic. I think one theme you've heard, hopefully, is, especially at the local level, we're interested in collaboration with whether it's our townships, our counties. We're interested in collaborating with our state partners. I imagine that's going to be a topic of this one as well, housing and homelessness. But in terms of funding and joint services, we're interested in that. And I know there's lots of communities in the state that are interested in that. And I think from us to our state representatives and our state partners, trying to help us collaborate and help us financially collaborate is something that should be continue to be thought of as new bills work their way through the process. Anything to help us and not hinder us in those processes. Just a small takeaway.
12 million that was put into the budget over the next 2 years for prevention initiatives, including 3 full-time staff to oversee that new and those new and expanded programs, along with skills enhancement, homeless youth support, veterans housing and recovery program, services for runaway and homeless youth were taken out of the budget by JFC. So there will probably be some standalone items coming. It's my understanding with the items that were removed that they can't be reintroduced by the JFC. So that mechanism is also clunky.
From the city side on this one, housing and homelessness, do we want any particular things you wanted to start with to start the conversation on? I don't know.
Yeah, and if I can add before anyone else who jumps in, can you touch on the tiny house village situation as well? And like, again, successful, not, what would you like to see different? Is that something that we can, I want to hear more about that, I guess, from the city's perspective.
Well, the tiny homes village is all completely private funded. It's not the city funding on it. It was well designed, but it was well designed with a person who had financial ability to pay for the items that needed to be done in order for it to be a success. Certainly they have operational challenges. They have, I think it's 25% vacancy right now, but it's more for funding than anything else. But as far as being a viable option, it is a viable option, but it was not necessarily a city initiative. It was philanthropic that came through and said, we'd like to do this and do it well.
I guess that's kind of where a little bit piggyback. So you led me right into the question of, does the city see this as an opportunity if there was some sort of funding in some aspect that was to come in, that the city would want to try to pursue something, an idea like that as well, where it's a little bit more under city jurisdiction of the actual execution of that plan?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's my understanding that there was, I believe, some social needs, and as the chief pointed out, some operational needs that I think there's a new executive director, a former county exec.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 34 units, and when I took a tour last year, it was my understanding also that TBRA, the tenant-based rental assistance, was what was the primary funding mechanism there, and we're vastly run out of the TBRA funding, and that gave, I think, 18 months for folks to be there to make that transition. So TBRA or other funding to help with the rent side of it, right? But then also those operational dollars.
Because now without TBRA, they're being rented at market rate, which is $1,100 or $1,200 a month, so it doesn't really help the market that it was intended to do.
So I think from my perspective, if the city were to want to do a project similar to that, but just publicly funded rather than privately funded, I think the question would go back to the legislature to say, how are you going to help us pay for it? Because we're sending the money north and we have to see it come back south in order for us to actually pay for those things. And when we don't have municipal services funded at 100%, we're not able to replace lead pipes, when we don't have enough paramedics, we're really strapped to be able to say, well, and we can add this one additional thing. I think it's a good question. I think that it would all come back down to how would the legislature fund it.
Sure. And funding isn't just the cap cost either. It's
Sure.
the operational cost year in and year out. Right now, the city of Oshkosh doesn't have a human services. There is no infrastructure in place to run social services programs within the city of Oshkosh. We rely on the county. And that is it's a structural problem in our relationship with the county, in getting the county to own what's theirs versus what's the city's. And I've been heard time and time again, the city of Oshkosh has a lot of resources right now, whether it be individual one-off programming or it's actual government programming for social needs within the city of Oshkosh itself. And we'd like to see it spread in other parts of the county rather than just the city of Oshkosh.
I think from a SANS, the funding mechanism, a model standpoint, I really like it. Doing the 18 months, I believe they could be there for 18 months. That rent was kind of collected in a kitty, and then for the next 6 months, that individual, when they weren't in the tiny home, could then go out and find a home on the market. I think being able to help folks when they have a hiccup in life, when they could potentially become homeless, having that immediate step in is the right move. It really helps not have to fund more robust programs down the road. Most people that experience homelessness, again, not going to be a homeless expert, maybe that's Carl right now, but most people that are in that homelessness or housing vicariousness, I mean, it really happens just from a hiccup in their life. I think one of the number one factors in homelessness was divorce or the loss of a job. It's just really that one time that something bad happens to you. You don't have the network, but if there's a tiny home that you can go live in for the next 18 months, 6 months, whatever it's going to take, it really helps get those people a respectable place to live, but then also back on their feet. So from a model standpoint, I love it. I think it has a little bit of the elements of like the HELP program too, is kind of in that similar kind of immediate needs stuff. But again, funding is always an issue. So to answer your question, I think the model is awesome. But
That's, just trying to get some
The
feedback.
model is very good, it's just the funding sources are problematic.
And I love a lot about having the tiny homes as the model, but I don't know that it's more or less effective than having, a more efficient structure than having individual 400 square foot. Maybe there's a need for that, and there's a need for more group home. There's a need for more, other different physical models of it. But the theoretical model of the nonprofit of providing on-site programming and resources and help, that's essential. And that, I think, is what always gets underfunded. That's always the first thing that people go, oh, money's tight, we can't have that second caseworker or whatever. And that's one of the things that, I've said to Joe all the time is if you have 50 people that are facing homelessness for whatever reason, you don't have one problem you have to solve. You have 50 different problems to help solve with them. They're not all AODA, they're not all mental health, they're not all divorced, but some are, but some are, but some are. So it is a a really labor-intensive process to help people get from experiencing homelessness to, self-sustainability.
Does the city actually do some sort of like data tracking with this though, a little bit from your perspective of like, again, 50 different problems. So is there any sort of trending that you're seeing, like in particular times of year or certain populations or whatever it is?
So
I'm getting a little deep in the weeds here because this is where I live in the data sometimes. So
one of the things that the city is currently, as a matter of fact, June 1st, we're standing it up. Council approved during the last budget season through a lot of work that was put in by some of our nonprofits and our philanthropic community and our community members who just want to do something. We're standing up a homeless outreach team that's been managed through the police department, that's partnered with a social worker that's been provided by the county, half funded by the county, half funded by the city. And the city just took that on and said, we need to do something. The city is owning that to the tune of, I want to say it's about $250,000 that the city itself is funding. That council said, we got to do this thing. And then other funding is coming from donors, and other funding is coming from the county for half the social worker. Part of that programming is to start developing data as to what are the root causes, why is our little population of what do we need to do to help them. There are a lot of different organizations across the county, actually 3 counties, that are talking about homelessness. And this group has some data set, this group has some data set, and what we're trying to do is say, okay, this is what we know. We know as a city, this is what we know is the problem with some of our folks. One of the pieces of information that I got from Carl probably 2 years ago now is, and I didn't know this, was our homeless populations, and you'll appreciate this, Carl was finding in his previous employment that our homeless population age was increasing, and it was increasing for various reasons, but they weren't coming out of homelessness because it was affecting their ability to get their prescriptions, because they were getting older and they'd have to get drugs. And if you can help me with that conversation, but it was resounding to me to know that these folks are staying in homelessness because they can't get the medications that they would get through Medicaid or.
And we're seeing that not only in the aged population, but even in the people dealing with AODA and mental health illnesses that are broad spectrum. That many of them had part-time jobs. Like when I was at Day by Day, 40 to 60% at any given time had jobs. And some of them were in a system where their SSI, if they worked too much, they would get kicked off of their prescriptions, which would mean then they go back into mental health crisis mode. And especially in the retired age, and they were disincentivized from trying to get out of that situation because in order to get their medication on time and timely, that was they had to be in that need. And so it really was disadvantaged for some of them to even work part-time, if they wanted to go be a grader someplace or something like that.
So to your point, we will be collecting data as a city starting June the 1st. The data collection that's going on right now is each particular group is working on whatever their data rules are, and it's their data. So, okay, good. But we want to know what really is our root cause of our homelessness here. What can we do to help people get out of homelessness? And we also have a clear understanding that there are a group of people who, they just want to be homeless. And we want to find those who want help, and we want to get them help to try to reduce the homelessness here in the city.
Thank you. Appreciate that insight, I really do. And then look forward, obviously, as things progress, getting more of that information.
It's my understanding too I think it's from data from Esther, that the number of young people becoming homeless, like under 24, is growing. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, it was the real growth of it was the front and the back end, the 18 to 24 and the 55 plus. And through the whole range, especially high in the LGBTQA plus community. And that was, we saw time after time people presenting to Day by Day that were kicked out because they came out, as a member of the LGBTQA, or as DJ says, the alphabet mafia,
I think Sarah was looking to share some things, and I don't know if it's on the housing or the homelessness or both, but
It was kind of on both, but I think it was kind of covered.
you sure?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm good, thanks.
From staff side on this particular topic, other parts that you wanted to make sure we shared regarding our initiatives and things
I
we're doing?
will add regarding the supply and demand of housing within our communities. There is a pressure point that was there. It's right now on pause with the current presidential administration, but we are taking a large amount of world relief folks into our community, which they're absolutely were here legally. It's not an illegal alien type issue. It's nothing of that whatsoever. But we have a college community here that had a college housing set available to them. There's been some new college development done for housing, but the majority of our rents for our community has been reduced. The ability of reasonable housing has been reduced because of the influx of folks that have been placed into our area, because we have lower rents here within our area. And it creates pressure for anybody else that looks for housing. We just don't have a good housing stock here that can help us getting people out of homelessness and can help our community find housing along the way because of the volume of additional folks who are being added to our community. Again, completely legally added to our community, but they're being added to our community, which puts pressure on our community resources to help everybody else in the community. It just puts pressure on us. And from a public safety perspective, I'd like to share the wealth with the rest of Northeast Wisconsin, have other communities take on some of these responsibilities. And I don't know what you all can do to address that, but it shouldn't just be in the Fox Valley that we're housing refugees from other countries here. We should share the wealth.
And I guess I'll add to that too. This kind of circles back to Jacob's question earlier. Also the short-term vacation rental housing is impacting, and there are folks in town and throughout the county who have allocated or determined that these homes that they own are to be for Airbnb, and even if they only have folks in there for part of the year, they can afford, because of the higher rental rates, to take those off the market. There was a couple I spoke with who moved here to Oshkosh, purchased a duplex, decided that they could pencil a couple of months of Airbnb of the other side, and that would be more, I guess, what do I want to say? Lucrative and less wear and tear. And the surrounding towns that are now part of the District 54 also are also having recently put in short-term vacation rental ordinances. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that in 2017, when the state said that municipalities could not restrict anything less than 180 days, we're starting to see some of the consequences of that. Obviously we want to have lots of events and lots of cool things and people to come and visit Oshkosh for tourism and that, but some of the housing stock has been impacted there, and there is a bill that came out last session, it'll come back this session, that would return that to local control. Hopefully we'll be able to get some support on that. It's not just Oshkosh, it's statewide. But I think that's one piece. And then on the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit, there is a bill that was just introduced last month. I believe it was Senator Roy's, and I can't remember the state rep who put this out. I think it was Hong.
I think so.
That would, again, basically allow for accessory dwelling units to be built by right, as opposed to, so that's a little bit of a contradiction, right, on local control. But of course, Oshkosh was ahead of the game there, but it's my understanding there have not been a lot of permits issued for those accessory dwelling units. So I think
One in the last 2 years.
One in the
So
last
that's not
years. So I think we have some work to do on incentivizing those ADUs.
The only thing I'll add on that, the SB 180 is the revision of the affordable housing rule that came through last session. And it passed through the Senate, I want to say unanimous, or the committee unanimously. A good bill. The adjustments, a part of them were important. In the Senate bill that passed, there's a stipulation that talks about the community itself before they can, get all the benefits. They have to show from 2023 forward that they've done things to make it easier. So zoning, permitting, setbacks, all that stuff. And one of the things that I challenged is, what if you started that earlier? What if you did it in 2020 because you were good? Now you're going to be penalized. We passed it through the committee in SB 80 without the change. However, we have been told that that is one of the amendments that will correct it in the House side, and then we'll adopt that. But that big bill put together really is meant to help our communities, especially the ones that need density. One of the changes we put in there, we really need these $125,000 houses built. We need small lots and $125,000 houses, not just for this young family, but for the retiree to move out of their house and make room. And all of that has to happen. So there's stipulations in there. We took out the stipulation on income restriction, but the concern is, what if we get people in there and then 2 years later they turn around and sell it for double the money? It's not going to help us. So we can't do the income restriction, but we did put in a single owner-occupied rule, and there's a 10-year hold on it that, in essence, is going to give us a decade for that neighborhood to sit in and do good. So I do really believe that bill will help. It also, again, you can layer the benefits, so historical TIF-TID, that's a big deal. We should be able to get some pretty good action on this money, and I think both sides of the House and the Senate understand housing is a big deal. But for our older municipalities, we are desperate. We must have net new growth, and that means we need these buildings set. So I think there really is good stuff coming from there. I believe it'll go through with the adjustment. According to Senator Quinn, who was the lead on our side, those adjustments we need will take place in the adjustments on the House, and we'll be able to pass that through. That's a good bill. They tried last time, we just needed to clean it up a little bit, but I think that will bring in effort. And I like, again, we're not just apartments and condos, which is good too. It's good too, but these individual houses are actually a really big step forward.
Yeah, and I would echo, you're talking about the bill that fixes the WIDA programs?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would echo, it's a very good bill. I know Representative Palmieri sat for far too many hours with me and my American Planning Association group on how to help fix that. I also, he's not here, but Senator Armstrong was huge in that push. I really want to thank both of you guys for listening and hearing municipalities and hearing these groups. And Kristen, you're on the WIDA board, so you know all about it. But I do think this is one of the rare instances where I'm going to say we've kind of asked for money maybe this whole time, right? I think with housing, the money is there. We have the program set up. Cities have TIF tools set in place. We have historic tax credits. I really think the barriers now are regulatory and are will. We all sit on this council. We know that when we propose any new housing, we get pushback. I firmly believe in new housing, firmly believe in making sure that we get these units built for the new families that we're hopefully going to be seeing here. But again, thank you guys for pushing that forward. I'd really like to see that move forward and to really put the tools into developers and cities' hands to make sure we can get these units built. And any other pressure you can put on. We talked a little bit about ADUs. One of the biggest issues with ADUs is our existing building code. We are incredibly unique. Wisconsin is we have our own building code. To my chagrin, maybe not to others, but I do think that our building code needs some tweaks, some adjustments to allow, to make ADUs more accessible, to allow more dense developments. Again, this is where I get to the issue right now is a little bit regulatory, and we have the funds, we have the ability, we just need to make those regulations pulled back a little bit, so.
Has there been any movement or changes to the first-time home buyers tax credit in the budget?
There were tax credits in there. I'm not sure if they were agreed upon or pulled out.
I'm going to take a guess that they're probably pulled out.
Okay.
Which I may have some choice words for that happening as a potential first-time homeowner. And so, and being one of the few legislators that are like 30 and under. So I think conversations are going to continue to happen on that, especially if it is a bill that was to be drafted potentially after the budget to bring back.
And this is a huge deal for us. I mean, we talk about attracting more talent to the area. We talk about raising owner-occupied rates in neighborhoods. This is something that is a really, really big deal. Obviously, you don't want to go in a direction where it just becomes inflationary across the board. But when we look at our housing stock, when somebody buys a home potentially for the first time, there's more work that may need to go into it than in another community, especially if it's a 60-amp home, has lead paint, has a lead service line, stuff like that. So that's something that I'm fairly adamant about that needs to be maintained or increased to the point where it's not inflationary. And then a couple of other regulatory issues, two-story walk-ups, stuff like that, dense housing. I know that's more of a local issue than a state issue. For me, one of the biggest frustrations that I have is where I see land where we have much smaller units that go in there. We could be building up a little bit more. I think we should probably be building up instead of out. And then a couple of other things, brownfield sites. We have a lot of infill development that we can be doing, and brownfield remediation is always a challenge. So we've been able to kind of move forward where we can, but rehabilitations of old buildings, brownfields especially, those are things that if it's more of a statutory item or a funding issue, we just want to make the best use of the space that we have, especially because we're as landlocked as we are. So those would be a few things on my end. But the biggest thing for me would be that first-time homebuyer tax credit.
I guess I just have to throw out a little bit of a bomb here too. There was a 4.5-hour public hearing. Yes, I listened to it over a couple of commutes in real estate and housing regarding case law Cobley v. Marquardt. There was much discussion because of the Wisconsin leases. It's impacting renters, it's impacting landlords, and apparently there are these 10 deadly sins that cannot be in a Wisconsin lease. And this particular case is now sitting, I think, going to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. But Republicans and Democrats alike are concerned about what this basically rental revolution will do to the availability of rentals. So keep an eye on that.
Recognizing that we're over time in 30 seconds, the one thing I will say is if you don't know, when it comes to homelessness, if you're waiting for faith-based communities and nonprofits to be able to solve the problem, you should stop waiting for that. They are at their capacity, they are tapped out, and
they're not able to raise the monies that they were raising.
They're not raising,
the economy.
Correct. You talk to our philanthropic community, and there isn't more money to go towards it. So it's not a problem that's just going to get solved by our nonprofits.
As Mr. Bulow pointed out, we're a little past 6:30, completely fine. We've got one more topic on the agenda.
You knew we would be.
It was a pipe dream, but if I didn't ask for it, I wasn't going to get it. So if I said 8, it would have been 8:30. So fireworks regulations in state statutes. I don't know who was the requester, but I suspect there may have been a few council members, and I know this was a thing for you when you were back on council as well. So I don't know where we want to go with this one.
Was there issues?
Oh, yes.
I see the sarcasm.
Nate, I might need your help on this one. Thank you to Councilmember Nichols and those of you who very thoroughly put forth that resolution asking the legislature to work on this. Appreciate the chief's discussions, and I've also had a number of conversations with our neighboring town, which is now in the 54th part of it. And it was very well written, the resolution. There is a very long history of fireworks legislation, and going back as I believe it was 2004, there was a legislative study committee that looked at fireworks, and then there were some recommendations that came out of that, and actually in 2007 the statutes went the other direction. So the gentleman that I've been talking to at Legislative Council indicated that it was there was some language in the statute that really was intended to be directed more towards your commercial display fireworks that then ended up kind of being utilized for the, I guess, consumer fireworks that we see today that, you know, we have issues with. There's a pragmatic recommendation that was made that would be low-hanging fruit, and that would be to simply ask our neighboring town if they would add at the end of their permit that it is not permissible to use these types of fireworks in the city of Oshkosh either, because it clearly issues a permit for possession and transport, but then goes on to say they are not to be used in the town of Oshkosh. So that was a simple solution. Another recommendation that they had was that the city of Oshkosh, and I'm not necessarily advocating for this, I'm just the messenger, have a designated location where things that go up and go boom could be done. Maybe not the best answer,
We
but
have that, Menominee Park, we will
That's
put out a
the-
professional.
the commercial. So there is some question about the transferability of the permitting being done by the retailer. Our office did look at the pyrotechnics database of some surrounding states. Illinois seems to have some language that is probably the most robust around the licensing and the selling of these things. Minnesota's kind of middle of the road, Michigan least restrictive, and then here in Wisconsin, of course, it's only $100 retailer fee for licensing to sell these items. So with that said, the gentleman that we've been working with made some recommendations that we could look at either addressing the permit itself and or who can issue it, as was recommended in your resolution. It may not necessarily move like we would like to see it, or just getting some clarifying language in there of the distinction between, you know, what applies to commercial fireworks displays over the consumer ones, if you will. So that's where we are. We're now ready to start drafting a P-Draft 1, 2, and 3, and the chief had offered to take a look at that as well, but would love to have support from other representatives to have that discussion or bring back an updated legislative study on that. It appears that most of the calls are noise related, so there's also some tweaking that maybe could perhaps be done with, you know, targeting just items that are loud. The town did indicate that they receive about $10,000 in fees from that retailer issuing those permits. And
it's only $100 fee. You say it was $100 fee?
it's a $100 fee for the retailer to have the license to sell them.
It's a $5 fee for the person to come and buy it.
Sure.
Right, or I thought it was 3.
Maybe
But
just,
yeah.
it's a very innocuous number for you.
Right.
It's a part of the purchase of the fireworks. You pay for your permit at the register.
Yeah, yeah,
Like going to a car dealership and getting your license.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I may have
So-
oversimplified with Representative Paul Mary what the legislation should look like. My comment to her was, if it goes up and goes boom, we shouldn't be able to do it. But that's really the essence of what our community has said, vocally, that they don't want it to disrupt based upon folks with PTSD. We have folks with mental health issues. We have animals. There's a lot of things out there that are affected by it, and a lot of people want to have fun with it. But frankly, law enforcement, whether it's Oshkosh or anywhere, does not have the resources to go after to enforce fireworks ordinances saying you can't fire them off in the city. It's structurally not able to do that because of the nature of fireworks going off unless we luck up on it. And frankly, there's just too many calls that occur during a holiday season that they're lit off for law enforcement to effectively enforce the ordinances and laws as they are right now.
And it's my understanding, and maybe I'm mistaken, that you know, it used to be the situation where it was mostly around, you know, 4th of July and that time frame, or maybe New Year's, but it's now year round, correct?
I just received an email last week with fireworks going off.
Heard them in my neighborhood last night.
Rep Palmieri, I'd be more than happy to have conversations with you as you drop that. But it's American. No, okay, I'm done.
There's that true blood coming out. There it is.
Anything else from city side or our rep side on that topic?
I guess just one question. So and it's not specific to fireworks, but it's one of the examples. So in the year that I've been on council, we've sent 3 resolutions to the legislature, and I think all 3 of them were unanimous. So that's us speaking for 70,000-ish people when we do that. Is that the most effective way for us? Because the fireworks one, Representative Palmieri and I had talked about a while back after it went through. There was one related to taxes that she and I had talked about. I hadn't heard from any of the other representatives on movement in that way. So I want to understand from the city communicating with the legislature, what's the most effective way for us to do that?
I would say keep doing that, actually. Contact my office, contact any of our offices as soon as that resolution has been passed just to bring it to our attention. From that standpoint, I guess you said you've been on for about a year now, so you're elected not this spring, but past spring.
Correct.
Yeah, last year was I didn't even technically represent Oshkosh until
at
a certain point.
I think they were all asked since the November election. At least one was.
Okay. Yeah, so, but again, please continue to send those. I do think that's an effective way, especially if it hits my inbox, I will see it. And then obviously having our conversations as legislators together and drawing that to each other's attentions too is probably the most effective way.
Great.
I think the only thing I'll add, being new to this, when they come up and we open up the emails, my immediate question to my staff is, well, now what? Because obviously it's a problem that you have no solution to, but to throw it to us to come up with a solution is not always the easiest thing either. But what has come from it is that we continue to ask questions. So when something comes up, we're doing our best to research the problem, and oftentimes the answer that we're getting back is, well, we don't do that. Okay, but why? And so we're asking our departments deeper questions, saying, well, we have a problem. We need to identify a solution somehow, some way, and we're asking deeper questions, which doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but at least it starts opening up a conversation that a problem does indeed exist. And it's more than the municipality can necessarily handle. And so we're going up to our not higher ups, but all these departments that are in charge saying, well, what if we challenge that? What's the next step? So the departments in government have to help us figure out what is the solution. If we can't just write a check, which we can't, right? But what is the solution? How do we go about fixing it as opposed to just saying this is the way it's been? So I think sometimes it's going to be disappointing that we can't give you the magic ball answer, but know that we are pushing that envelope deeper and deeper to try and find out, but what then? If not this, then what? And all municipalities are in this issue. I mean, we all know that we are over a decade into, being short on dollars, and our problems continue to rise. I think it's going to be difficult if each community asks individually for nods and favors. That's not going to go well. So I think we have to find better solutions, which is let us hear the problem and let us dig into these departments that are actually, if it's legislation, if it's regulations, whatever that may be, we have to start working with our municipalities to find answers, and there has to be a willingness in Madison to start that out.
So if sorry.
Just real quick too, to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying too, with you sending that to us, at least that flags it for us as your representative saying, hey, this is an issue we want you to look into. One of my first things though is, especially if it's going to be legislative fix potentially, is we're going to have to get buy-in from our colleagues and how many of those communities are facing those same issues. And that's really, where can we start building some of those bridges to build the coalition, so when that legislation does finally come to light, it's not going to be like pulling teeth to actually get it through the process. That's how I typically envision it.
And to your point, just kind of circling back to the Department of Revenue, the revaluation, the whole request to be able to go back to the prior year's assessment and that. I would encourage you as members of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities to put pressure on them to get me their position statement, because I was speaking with someone across the aisle who was willing to have that conversation about some changes there, but they wanted to see the position from League of Wisconsin Municipalities. And I don't want to throw shade on anyone, but I am still waiting for that after 3 reminders. So
That's a big deal.
as your membership pulling weight there, please ask them to take a position on that.
Fantastic point.
And that's a good point. I want to reiterate that too, because that's where I was actually going to suggest as well, that we as a body need to do a better job of making sure that the league knows our position and that we're, as one of the larger ones in the state of Wisconsin, pushing them to take positions and also connect with our sister communities throughout the state and start creating our own leverage, even, either simultaneously or prior to sending things their way.
Yeah.
And you're one of 18% of communities that had a similar problem, and that individual that I approached, his communities was one of them. That was also in a similar.
We start doing a better job of that too.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I will say, just because when we did send we sent 3 resolutions to you, one of them was asking for more dollars, and that was, please write a check, municipal services payment. The other, and that's really the answer there. I don't really know how to fix that one. The other 2 though were legislative changes, and we did actually provide specific recommendations of how we would like to have that change. And then actually for the tax one in particular, I'll just because this came up, and I want to be clear that we are doing this. We pointed out other districts that are blue and red, other cities, and identified your representatives, your colleagues, I'm sorry, that are in those districts that of the municipalities that are facing the same problems.
Yep.
So we did do that, and we are communicating that. But to the extent that we can communicate it better, I know we're all ears.
Well, I want to say thank you, council members, for taking the time, city staff as well, and to our state representatives and senators. Thank you for being here. Having the chance for us to speak directly to you is important. I will extend an invite right here. We meet every second and fourth Tuesday, and you are more than welcome to come here and tell us the things you're working on that can help benefit the people who call Oshkosh home. Won't allow you to politic, but I'll allow you to tell us everything and anything you want to do to that you are doing to help better this community and better the state of Wisconsin. So. And I know there are 6 other people who are
waive the 5-minute rule.
I can extend that as needed.
I talked really fast last time I was here.
But want to always say you're always welcome to tell us about things that are happening at the state that benefit this community. If there's nothing else from any of my colleagues here or city staff, we can wrap up.
I just want to mention one other thing that you might be interested to hear about, and that is that there is some discussion, and I think a bill draft floating around on increasing on TIF from the 12% total to 18%. Is that right?
Oh, I'll take that.
Because we
I saw Sarah.
well, and let's
Sarah got very engaged very fast.
In local government, we had 3 exceptions for very specific communities. Just in the last 30 days, come in, specific bills, and it's like, why are we doing this by exception? And it hasn't been increased since the 60s or 70s. So just keep an eye on that one.
Will do.
It's been mainly centered around data centers.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Typically.
Is the year extension still at play?
Yeah, wasn't there a possible
Yeah.
3-year housing extension option?
I believe that's, I'm not sure.
Dead.
I was very optimistic.
I
That
don't know if
would've
I got
been
it
great.
right. Not sure.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.